Alright. I'm going to kind of go over, I had someone ask me about steering, so I'm going to kind of go over what I think is the easiest, cheapest way to do it if you're going to big block an S10, because you're going to have issues with the steering at the firewall and your exhaust. And then the way I did it, is different now because my headers come up and forward. So I put it back in the stock location. I just dropped it down. Okay. First thing, let's get in here amongst all this mess. Alright, where it comes to the firewall, the cheapest and easiest thing to do is unbolt it, notch it over here, and move it over 1.5 inches to the driver's side. Yes, it will put the steering column at an angle, but it's not so noticeable like you would think when you get up and sit behind the steering wheel. My truck was like that for 3 years. Okay, you can get a little bit of movement up there at the dash and scoot it over as far as you can to the driver's door. You'll get a little bit, not much, but you can get about 1/4 inch, which, you know, getting whatever you can get is better than nothing. But moving it over down here, the best thing to do is once you get your exhaust, whatever you decide to use, whether it be Chevelle manifolds or headers or whatever you're going to do, then figure out where you need to move it. Don't go hacking all this up, because then you got to cut and plate all this back in or weld a piece back in, because the plate on the end of that column is huge. You have a pinch weld that runs across down here, and that can be a pain in the ass. But that's the easiest and cheapest way to do it. Now, what I did was, I've got just one of their generic columns from Speedway. I think for whatever, they're just a tube steering column. They're like $92, $95. They come with the detachable steering wheel hub. It's 1-inch double D down here, which is the same as your S10 would be. Then I use a shaft for a Jeep Cherokee Comanche pickup, mid-90s, because it's 1-inch double D, and down here it's, I believe this is 3/4 30 spline down here at the box, and I've got a manual box on this one. Okay, I just dropped mine down as far as it would go. So I cut the hole, I made my mount, I welded a new piece into the firewall. I took a piece of fuel line and split it and put it around there as a grommet to seal it, and I put a little seam sealer around it, poked it through just what I needed. Mine is down real low. I'm clear down against that pinch weld. As you can see, shaft comes right over the top of the control arm, which I have tubulars, which gives me more room. You're not going to be able to do this with a stock control arm, because all the bulk that you have back here is going to hit. These upper control arms I got in Speedway also. They're actually metric G-body arms. You want 2, I believe it's 8-inch. You don't want the 8.5, you want 8s. Put one on one side, flip one over, run it on the other side. I've got a stock Moog ball joint for an S10 in here. They're for a G-body. G-body stuff will fit an S10. Okay, they're $49.99 a piece. You can get them with steel centers like I got with greasable bushings, or an aluminum shaft with greasable bushings. I've had these on here for 3 years, and I've never had an ounce of trouble out of them. Much better than buying like Ubing Performance or QA1 or any of those other companies that want like $500-600 for a couple control arms. It's nothing more than a bunch of damn tubing welded together. But the best thing to do is figure out what exhaust you're going to use and then adjust your column. But again, the cheapest and easiest way is, again, undo it here, move it to the passenger side. You can move it down a little bit if you want to, or you can move it up. You can trim the piece off of the end of your column and put another piece of sheet metal on. The best thing is that here, just take your time with it. Don't get in a hurry, because you screw up your firewall, you're going to be in trouble. Okay? You know, if you don't have a welder, you can put a piece of metal in there and pop rivet it. I would not suggest using self-tappers because they will back out after a while. But you can rivet it in real good with a steel rivet. Don't use an aluminum rivet because they'll walk loose too. But this here, you can go to the boneyard and get them. I did it the first time. Second time I bought mine new off of, where did I buy this one? I think it was on eBay. But when you take it apart, you've got to cut about 2 inches off of the 3/4 double D solid side and slide it back together so it'll work on the S10. But you got a U-joint here, you got a U-joint there. It's better. You get rid of the rag joint, you get rid of that socket joint up here. Like I said, my first one was off of I want to say early 90s Jeep Comanche pickup. This one's actually for like a 95, 96 Jeep Cherokee. And they work really well. It's a much better option. Now, you gotta excuse the mess in here because this truck's getting all revamped over the winter. See my breath, it's like about 20 degrees out here. But, now here's the Speedway column. You can see you got a little pin right here. Pull it out. Steering wheel comes off. This one was $92 is what I think I paid for this one from Speedway. I think it's a 32-inch column. Nice gears, bearings. What I did down here was on the factory mount where the S10 column bolts in, I took and cut those 4 little bolt nubs off where they thread in to hold it. Took the factory bracket, I took a cutoff wheel, cut it off. I took a piece of muffler clamp for a 2-inch muffler clamp, the bottom of it. I put it up in there so the saddle was flush with the bottom of the mount. I welded it in, put the muffler clamp over the top of it, pulled it down and tightened. Don't tighten it too tight because you'll crush this tube and you'll mess everything up because there's bearings inside here where that shaft goes. You just got to snug it down enough to hold it. Then I made my own mount down here at the firewall, basically. And it's just a piece of plate that I bent around it with 2 angle iron ears on either side that bolts through the firewall. Okay. Now when you're sitting in here, if you move your column over, say down there 1.5 inches, I think mine was closer to 2 inches. When you're sitting up here, you don't really notice it at all. I never had anybody that was around the truck or in the truck or sat in the truck that noticed it. My wife drove the truck. My youngest drove the truck. Here, you know, of course with me in it, but they never said anything about the steering wheel being off. They never noticed it. This time, it's set straight. It's in the stock location. It's straight. It's not off to one side because my headers go up and forward for the turbos this time. But it's dropped way down. It's all the way down against that pinch weld. They're at the bottom of the firewall and the floorboard come together. There are places that make these columns for G-bodies and for S10s. They're kind of pricey, but like I said, this is $92. I don't think they charge you much, if anything, Speedway does with shipping. I think I paid it's like 105 or 110 maybe altogether with shipping. I know it was right around $100. But, and I did it to remove the steering wheel so it's easier to get in and out with my door bars and all on the cage. Because I don't want swing out bars, I want a solid bar over here. But, and my bars are welded through the floorboard, if they're through to the frame, they're not welded to the body. But anyway, this would be the best way I think to do it. Now, I've put a big block in these trucks 4 times. I did the 4-wheel drive truck, and this is the 3rd time on a 2-wheel drive truck. This was the better option, because even with this, it's easier to mount it down there at the firewall for one. You can make your own mount. Basically, take the stock one out, take the plate on the bottom of the steering column, make a template out of sheet metal, put it up there, weld it back in, rivet it back in. You can take a hole saw, you can punch you a 2-inch hole through somewhere down there where you want it. possibly a little bit bigger than 2 inch, because this is in an angle, so it's not going to go through squares. So like maybe a 2 5/16 hole, 2 5/8 hole. Put this through and put it where you want it. And at that point, you can put it lower, you can put it to the side, you can put it higher, whatever you need to do to clear your exhaust. Now, as far as exhaust that I know will work, if you don't really want headers, early Chevelle 68, 69 big block manifolds will work, where the one dumps straight down back here by the back two cylinders, the other one dumps at about a 45-degree angle out the back. Okay, if you're going to use headers, the only thing I found that works, that's cheap, is a Gen 1 Camaro header for the passenger side. This side I used a block hugger header for a Tri-5 Chevy, which is 55 to 57. It will go in, it'll go right down here between the oil filter and the engine cross member. It'll dump straight down. Depending on the header, you may have to come in here in that little spot right, see if I can get in here closer. Right here on your frame, you might have to cut a little notch for your collector, depending on how high or how low the collector is on the header. Headers are all different. Okay, and you may have to heat the frame up and beat it in right here. That's what I had to do, but I was using a cheap eBay stainless header. So we've used the Sanderson Tri-5 headers, and they work, but you want to keep it in tight to the motor as much as you can. Then you just put a 90 on it, kick it under your oil filter, and go straight back with it. And another thing, I run the 9906 small block Chevy mounts. I just trimmed this one up to clear the oil galley plugs on this side, depending on how far your plugs stick out of the block. Whether you're using a countersunk plug that goes all the way in with like an Allen head in it, or an external brass plug, you'll have to make the motor mount fit. Trim the ears off. Don't use this lower hole that's slotted. Use the upper hole. It'll set the engine down another 1.5 inches. It'll set more level. It'll set further forward. So basically you have a ton of room. And I'll show you that. I'm just going to show everything around this damn thing so everybody can see. But this video is mainly for one particular gentleman. See how much room I've got? I can get to every bell housing bolt in this truck with this big block in here. It's easier to work on this than it is a damn small block. Or even a stock V6 in one of them. With all the AC crap and everything on it. Okay? But you want the header to dump there. The other option is up and forward turbo headers. The only ones I've found that would work, like what I'm using, again, excuse the mess, is these from CX Racing. These are for a Chevelle. They make a set for a C10 that are not quite as tight to the engine. These are so tight that you either have to run a spacer between the header and the head to run a big valve cover, or you have to run like a marine valve cover that's got the side slanted on it to give you clearance for marine headers. And that's what's going on this engine. Those rare Morrison ones are coming off, and I'm going to run the slant top Eddie Marine valve covers that basically they come up and then they cut off this corner. So this is what hits the header. It hits the V-band clamp actually, where you clamp the adapter on for the turbo. And they're about a $500 set of headers for those CX Racing ones. They're like $550, $580 a set, but they're stainless. But if you want to save money, I've also been told that Gen 2 Camaro headers will work. Hedman Gen 2 Camaro headers will work, the shorty ones. But for what I've used and what I know is a block hugger that dumps down in front of the oil filter. You want the tubes grouped as tight as you can to go down through there. I'd get my old headers out and show you, but they're upstairs and I can't get up there right now. And on this side, you've got to trim the ear off the transmission, but the Gen 1 Camaro header will dump right down through there inside the frame. Now, if you'll have to again trim the ear, if you got a trans brake solenoid, you'll have to make sure you get your exhaust pipe over away from it, like I've got down there. And you will have to run these control arms. Otherwise, you won't have enough room. The header will hit the back of the control arm on an OEM control arm. On these, it won't. That's the main reason why I had those on there. But again, on the steering, yeah, mid-90s Jeep, Cherokee, Comanche pickup. And then you can use your OEM column, or you can buy one of these Speedway generic columns. You can get them in stainless or plain painted steel or aluminum. I think they've got several versions, several lengths. A 32-inch is about what you need for a S10 to make it right. Otherwise, the steering wheel is going to be all up in your chest. And then just put it where you want it down here. Like I said, just cut that out, put a piece back in, hole saw your new hole, put it where you want, down, up, wherever, to clear your tubes. See what I'm saying? It's kind of the measure 3 times, cut once thing. But again, Chevelle manifolds work. You can flip manifolds side to side, but you can't flip them upside down. Because of the staggered pattern, you'll be like a quarter of a hole off. Or you can run a turbo header and run it out the fender or down around. It depends on what you're going to do with the truck. Most people's going to put a big block in one of these. It's not going to be a daily driver. You know, it's going to be a hot rod. So, block hugger header on this side. Gen 1 Camaro for that side. Or Chevelle manifolds, you're pretty limited, or build a set. You know, build a set. I've got a set of Lemons headers for one of these trucks upstairs, 2 1/4 inch tube. They're ceramic coated. Very expensive set of headers. You really have to cut the engine cross member up to get them to work. And quite frankly, I think they're nothing but junk. I would never drive a truck with an OEM front end with a set of their header. You just got to cut so much of it up around the control arms. It makes it too weak, I think. But the way I've done this one, I only cut the engine cross member 3 inches out of it and boxed it back in. And that's to clear it's either a 7 or 8 quart Meladon pan that's on there. All I know is the pan's 9.5 inches deep. You can see. But that's it. Like I said, you can see where mine's at. I dropped it down low. You can put the U-joints in there. It gives you a little bit more ability to put a little more angle on your on your steering shaft. It's a much better setup. And you can go online like Amazon. We bought one for my boy's truck on Amazon. His 88 to 98, his 93 did the same thing to it. And we bought it on Amazon